Business. Craig Foss.
Mr Speaker, I so move. Mr Speaker, the National Government, led by Prime Minister John Key and Finance Minister Bill English, is focusing on the things that matter. Mr Speaker, the Opposition Finance Spokesman is focused in the mirror. Mr Speaker, the Opposition Leader is focused on the Opposition Finance Spokesman, who's focused on the mirror. The Opposition Leader, Mr Speaker, is focused on his back. Mr Speaker, tomorrow's budget is a step up and a step change for New Zealand. A step up and a step change, a step towards real growth, real incentives, sustainable, ongoing and brighter future for New Zealanders who Labor punished so badly for so long and hurt so many and sent so many overseas looking for a brighter future, Mr Speaker. 9 long years of punishment from the rich pricks to the poorest. Mr Speaker, game's up, it's over. Fairness and equity is coming back, Mr Speaker. Economic leadership, economic confidence in New Zealanders, Mr Speaker, is coming back, and that will be evidenced in the budget tomorrow, Mr Speaker. As the Reserve Bank noted this morning in their financial stability report, New Zealand's economy is so much less vulnerable now than it was just 2 years ago. We're in such better straits, such better form than just 2 years ago, Mr Speaker, and we know in the global context with threats all around the globe how important management, prudent fiscal management of our debt, encouraging New Zealanders to move away from bricks and mortar investment to financial assets is so important, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, National's solid economic credentials are stronger and we are a responsible economic manager with a growth plan and an improved tax system which will be outlined tomorrow, Mr Speaker. A tax system that removes the distortions, the imbalances, the shenanigans and shambles created and in fact encouraged but ignored by the previous administration. Mr Speaker, New Zealand is borrowing $250 million per week simply to keep the economy turning over and the lights on. $250 million right now under the current situation. We have no room for any more borrowings whatsoever, Mr Speaker. There's a pretty long queue out there, and we all know what's going on in Europe, which is also stressing our system, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, we've already brought spending under control. After crazy, shambolic spending over many years, we're bringing spending under control. We've got a 1.4 cap on operational new spend and a $1.8 billion cap on capital investment, Mr Speaker. That is quite a change and focus change from the previous administration. Mr Speaker, we inherited a shambles. Labor took New Zealand into recession over 1 year before the global crisis hit. Over 1 year before the global crisis hit, Mr Speaker, Labor took New Zealand into recession. In fact, the New Zealand economy, the private sector, was in recession since about 2004. That's the sector that creates jobs. That's the sector that feeds families, Mr Speaker. It's actually been in recession from 2004 to 08 for 4 or 5 years under the previous administration. What an oil tanker we're having to turn around, Mr Speaker, but we'll do it. Anyone remember export year? Anyone remember that? What a joke. We inherited a decade of deficits, 10 years of having to borrow, forecast borrowings to fund the promises, the commitments, the unsustainable spending that previous administration put in place and did nothing about. Mr Speaker, we will be fixing a tax system where anyone earning around $50,000 was deemed a rich prick by the previous administration. Well, I'll remind those people opposite, those rich pricks supposedly, they included doctors, teachers, scientists, police, journalists even, Mr Speaker. They are actually the engine room of the New Zealand economy, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the previous administration created massive holes in the problems and the holes in our income tax rates, trust tax rates, corporate tax rates, pie tax rates and the treatment of investment property, Mr Speaker. They talked about this issue for quite a lot, to be fair to them. They talked about it for a lot. They did nothing about it other than perpetuated it and try and put band-aids on. Mr Speaker, it's about to be fixed. This government's about fairness and equity, Mr Speaker. This budget is about delivering fairness and equity to New Zealand, Mr Speaker. This budget will deliver a historic rebalance of the New Zealand economy, Mr Speaker. Fairness and equity is coming back. We've even pulled the decade of deficits back to about 6 years, Mr Speaker. After only 18 months, Mr Speaker, the decade of forecast deficits is down to about 6 years, Mr Speaker. In the current global environment, Mr Speaker, that is very, very good indeed. Mr Speaker, the New Zealand economy is already in so much better shape than it was just 2 years ago.
David Cunliffe.